This is the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast session number 77, the 3 tiers of successful hiring.
Welcome to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast with Jason Linett, your professional resource for hypnosis training and outstanding business success. Here's your host, Jason Linett.
Hey, it's Jason Linett here, and we're about to jump inside of my business training program, Hypnotic Business Systems. I'd share with you if there was one specific strategy that has really helped me to grow out my hypnosis business. It's learning the systems and it's learning the mindset and the strategies behind outsourcing. The magical statement is just because you can do it all yourself doesn't mean you should do it all yourself. And as over the years, I've learned the mechanisms to duplicate myself. It's allowed me to borrow the phrase from the classic book, The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, to spend more time working on my business rather than just in my business. And I'd share to learn the principles, to learn the thinking behind how do you successfully outsource the tasks within your work that you don't want to be the one doing. You know, that's something that just frees us up so much more. That as I'm able to spend more time, simply put, just seeing my clients, I'm able to spend more time with my family. I'm able to leave my laptop at the office and go home and be there with my kids, be there with my wife. So you'll hear me use this phrase in this clip we were about to jump into, that many people would say, I can't afford to do that. To which instead I would tell you, you can't afford not to do that in terms of outsourcing. And what you're about to listen to is just one module inside of the outsourcing mastery section of Hypnotic Business Systems, which is my online hypnosis business training. You can check it out at hypnoticbusinesssystems.com. You'll get all the details about that program there. Though this is just one segment of the outsourcing module because it's what I refer to as the 3 tiers of successful hiring. That many people would enter into the outsourcing communication perhaps at the wrong entry point, if that makes sense. They would begin by looking for someone full-time, and that's why often it became a whole lot more expensive than it needed to be. They'd begin by hiring by the hour, and they hadn't yet clarified what the job is. And you're going to hear the 3 specific levels of outsourcing, the 3 specific hurdles that I recommend you go through as you're looking at hiring somebody on. Now, there's some hypnotic content inside of this, though again, this program here of Work Smart Hypnosis, it's about professional hypnosis training and outstanding business success. So this week's session of the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast is all about outstanding business success. So be ready to take some notes, be ready to consider some different mindsets of your business briefly, because this is just one segment of a much larger training module. If you have not outsourced at all, I will reference one of my favorite websites to use is one by the name of upwork.com. That's upwork.com. So the 2 words, upwork.com. In general, I know some of you may have used a service by the name of Fiverr, Fiverr.com. I generally do not endorse that company, so wonders of outsourcing. I don't write the show notes for this program, so hey Katie, as you're writing the show notes, don't link to Fiverr because I don't endorse them, but do link to Upwork.com because they are phenomenal. They are outstanding. So that tends to be my go-to resource in terms of getting started with looking at options for outsourcing. So let's jump directly into the content. These are the 3 tiers of successful hiring, session number 77. Here we go. Hey there, it's Jason Linett, and this is Hypnotic Business Mastery. Now, here inside of this module, simply titled Outsourcing Mastery, I want to give you a bit of an overview in terms of what I refer to as the 3 tiers of successful hiring. Let me give you a bit of an expectation on this before I actually launch into the content here. You see, because inside of the task of outsourcing, The ultimate goal, in my honest opinion, is to establish relationships with people that you can trust to bounce projects off of. So I want you to break down this expectation that you're going to find an individual one person to do this one single task, which by all means you can do that, and you can make use of all the information inside of Hypnotic Business Systems in this module to do that. However, imagine the benefit that comes from establishing a relationship with a skilled technician, that suddenly here comes another project, here comes another task, and you wish to run some of your business systems again, but now in a different market. And it becomes so much easier to reach back to somebody who you've already vetted, somebody you've already worked with before, and you trust the results that they're going to get. And just to simply establish that relationship once again, and just simply say, again, my favorite phrase, make me one like this. So with that, let's jump to the screen here. This is the 3 tiers of successful hiring. So it's all about the different mindsets. It's all about the different approach. And the 3 tiers that you need to pass through, in my opinion, to go to a full place of mastery in terms of outsourcing. So let me go ahead and just give you the overview first, because these are the 3 tiers. We're going to break it down. But basically, this is the sequence that you definitely will make use of step number 1. You absolutely should, in my opinion, transition over to step number 2. The completely optional is step number 3, which, again, I'll give you examples of this the whole way through. Though, as you can see, phase 1, tier 1, hire for the task. So I need some photos edited. I need some things improved on my website. I need the navigation bar rebuilt. You get the idea. Here's the task. Do it. And you agree upon a rate. And again, to learn how to do that, look to the other modules inside this outsourcing mastery section. Phase number 2 is to hire for the hour. So that's where you're paying somebody for their services by the hour. And just the briefest overview, that is the next logical step to take based on the task, because at that point, you've already vetted the person, you've already worked successfully with them, and now you know it's appropriate to trust them on more of an ongoing basis. But then from there, the ultimate level of outsourcing is to hire for the role. So for example, I have a dedicated video editor. I have a dedicated web designer programmer, and I'm in the midst right now of hiring, and you're going to see this chronicled inside of the content in Business Systems. You're going to see me actually go through the step of hiring somebody for some general purpose virtual assistant work, mostly editing, mostly formatting as well. So let's break this down step by step. As you begin your task of outsourcing, you should absolutely begin with hiring for the task, which in most cases, this is going to reveal itself rather easily. I have these photos that need to be edited. I need these videos embedded on my website. I need this opt-in form programmed and these follow-up email sequences built out. So hiring based on the task. Now, you're going to refer back to some of the other videos inside of this module to see how to navigate inside of a system, whether it's Fiverr, which I, again, generally don't recommend, but it can be used, or perhaps Upwork, to post a job, give a good solid description, as you've learned here how to do, and then as people are bidding on the job, then you're then selecting the one who is the most qualified to work with. So you're basically hiring for the task. Here's the thing that needs to get done. Here's the exact rate that I'm going to pay. And then there's some negotiations. The work begins, the job is completed, and then the money is released. That's what we mean by hiring for the task. So I recommend you always start with this, because it really doesn't allow much of a place for the negotiation, for the work, or even the final payment to go wrong, because they either do the job correctly, and if that's the case, the money is released by way of the service you're making use of, or they don't do the job correctly, at which point you appropriately end the contract. And either, as I like to do, I release a small amount of the payment as a show of goodwill. In most experiences, they don't accept the money, but at least I offered. And I'm giving a good logical explanation as to why the job was ended. So it's an example of I wanted to have a one-click upsell programmed into a sales sequence. And this gentleman that I hired felt the job could have been done in a better way, which he did the job the way that he thought it should have been done, which good for him for having an opinion, but that's not what I asked for. So if I had hired based on by the hour at this point, he had put in several hours of work, but it clearly was not what I requested. And I sent a message over to him by way of Upwork explaining, no, that's not what I want. Here's an example of what I do want. At which point he honestly responded and explained, I don't know how to do that. To which the logical response then was, then you shouldn't have accepted and bid on the job. So rather than pay the $100 I had promised, I released $20 as a courtesy for his time. He denied it, and I eventually hired someone else. So hiring by the task converts your job to be a very digital style of application. It's either a 1 or a 0. It's either a yes or a no. They either did the job or they didn't do the job. And again, this is all very standard in operating inside of a system like Upwork or whatever they eventually rebrand as. So it's a great example of this is how we're passing over that initial threshold. Does this person know how to do the job that I need? And there have been times where in most cases it works wonderfully well, and in many cases it's not. So hiring somebody for your first tier by the task, that tends to be my best recommendation, because you're not going to end up in the scenario where if you started off by hiring based on the hour, you could have paid this person 16 hours to do the job that was not what you wanted them to do. So phase 1, begin by hiring by the task. That is the first tier of successful outsourcing. So let's move on now to phase 2. This person has now done a good job. Now, the magical word in terms of business these days is that of doing a pivot. Pivot, P-I-V-O-T. Pivot. So once I have successfully worked with you and you have done good work with me, I will then spin around and by way of private message, either inside of Upwork, inside of Skype, I will make you the offer to say, I would like to continue this relationship on a as-needed basis. Can you send me a job offer for an hourly rate? And in my experience, I have really yet to have someone say no to that, because the benefit now becomes their understanding that I'm going to use them again. And also the use of the phrase as needed is explaining that I'm not looking at hiring them full-time. I'm not even looking at hiring them part-time. And if there's further questions, the easiest explanation of this would simply be that, well, on any given month, I could probably expect to have a good 6 or 7 hours towards this type of task. Maybe a little bit more if I'm launching a new product or service or doing some updates on the website. Give them an expectation. And in my experience, many people respond and what they quote is quite reasonable. And the benefit of doing this through a service like Upwork is that if I make use of them a number of times, fantastic. And if I don't make use of them at all, fantastic. It's part of the understanding. And the benefit also becomes is that I'm locking that person in on that rate. So there are people that are continuing to work for me at a reduced rate, and they're bringing in new people in at a higher rate. So my one-click upsell guy, which I'm actually in the market to replace him right now for some reasons far beyond the content of this video. It's an example where as long as I reach out to him, he's working for me for $50 an hour, which might sound like a lot, but it takes him 2 hours to program something that for any product launch usually equates to an additional $10,000 to $15,000. Yeah, here's my money. And he's now $75 an hour for new people, which again, take note, if I tried to do that, I would be staring at a computer screen for 8 hours with no results. Hire the expert. But the software has updated right now, and what he's programmed is not working. That's why I'm looking to replace him. Or maybe point out the issue and try to fix the relationship. So basically, note the sequence here. I hired somebody first for the individual task, and once I saw that they were qualified, that's when I then pivoted and offered them an hourly contract, which by doing that with a system like Upwork, again, you are not guaranteeing them a number of hours. You are not promising anything. The benefit is it keeps them in the queue. It keeps them in your open account. It keeps the contract open. And granted, it's probably a good idea that if you're planning on having some jobs ready in a couple of days, send the person a message a few days in advance just to check in on their availability. And then from there, send the job over. But again, by having these people as if on a retainer, this has been a massive productivity hack in terms of my business. Because here's a moment where I want to get some Facebook ads designed for some social media streams. And at one point, I was using this woman by the name of Maya, and I'd be able to reach out to her to say, hey, next week I'm going to do some new campaigns. Is this a good time for you to do some new ads? And she goes, when's your deadline? I go, well, I'm not going to run the ads until next week, Thursday. At which point she goes, great. And then we're in business. And granted, you may have heard, if you're a listener to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast, that used to be edited by a woman by the name of Marie, but then Marie, as her family expanded, is no longer available. So instead, I hired a company called Audio Adrenaline, and they're the company now that does my podcast. So now for that ongoing project, I'm not dependent upon an individual. I'm dependent upon a company, which they have standards, they have practices that are in place. And the benefit now becomes that it just gets done. It gets taken care of in that format. And that's kind of on an hourly contract, the way I make use of them. But that kind of bridges the gap now into the third tier of successful hiring, which is then to hire for the role. Now, this final tier is one that not everybody needs, because chances are, well, let's look at my business, for example. Once I got Virginia Hypnosis built out in terms of the virginiahypnosis.com website, that really didn't require any kind of ongoing maintenance. Yes, there's some occasional updates, but that's not really a project that requires a lot of ongoing maintenance. And most of it, I know enough to be dangerous. I know enough to go into my website and make some adjustments. But for the most part, I don't need someone on that website every single day. Now, by way of comparison, Work Smart Hypnosis, the ongoing training and portal for the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast, that's an ongoing project. That has weekly updates. These training programs have daily updates. The amount of video content alone is massive. And the editing of that, my system for the video editing is that I tend to do the first pass. I tend to do the cropping. I tend to do the at least artistic vision of what the content should look like. And yet then from there, someone else goes in, and as I like to say, he makes it pretty. So the flow is very often one that I need someone in a more dedicated mindset. I need someone on a more dedicated position. So for that, at the time of this recording, I'll tell you what I have. I have Chris, and she is my web designer / web programmer, which she is the reason why everything now has a common through line. And she works for me full time. And I pay her a set rate on a monthly basis. And as much as I use her, that's the rate. Now, of course, there's limitations. She works a standard work schedule. Now, there's also Jefferson. Jefferson, at the time of this recording, is my video guy. And Jefferson does the screenshots of the videos. He does the maintenance of my YouTube channel. He does the graphic design for the logo sequences. He does the zooming, the editing, the crossfading, the cleaning up, as well as other related tasks as well. So because I have such an ongoing need for both web design and web programming plus video, that's why these are people now, and they only work for me. So these aren't people that I'm able to say, oh, they can do work for you too. I can reference people who've worked for me in the past, but I'm keeping these individuals busy. Likewise, I do my best writing in a format where I cannot get visually creative. So this is my strategy. If I'm designing an email sequence, if I'm designing content for a website or a blog post, or even the transcriptions that are associated with these training projects, I am either editing those inside of a text editor, so Notepad or whatever it's called on a MacBook, or I'm working inside of Microsoft Word. I am not designing these pieces of content in a thing like WordPress or Photoshop or anything where I can get creative, because the visual aspect of that is not my skill. So actually, this is going to be cool. Part of my hiring process to bring on my third full-time virtual assistant, specifically for content management, is going to be chronicled here inside of Hypnotic Business Systems. You're going to see me using a newer resource to track down a full-time, or actually, I'm going to aim for part-time for this, because I don't think I have 40 hours a week for this individual. I think I probably only have about 20 hours, though most websites are saying 30 hours and under are actually considered part-time. And you're going to actually get to interact with the actual digital Skype conversations, the hiring negotiation process, as well as my explanations as to what I need. So you're actually going to get a real behind-the-curtains view of what it's like when I hire somebody directly for the role. Now, take note. This is going to be for a task that I have been bursting at the seams with a need for. So it's where I know the ins and outs of what I need before I'm ever about to hire for the role. So understand, this is where hiring for the task, back to the initial phase. Let me show you the entire system here from start to finish. When you're in an early phase of getting started, that's where you want to start off by hiring for the task. Because understand, that's a place where you are also still probably figuring out what the hell you need in the first place. But by doing that, you yourself are getting a bit of an education, because you're learning the ins and outs of what you need and what your best result is going to be. And you're better able to express it to somebody else what your goal is for hiring by the hour. And only at that point now, there's a level of mastery of your knowledge as to what you really need and what your ongoing demands are going to be. So that's another thing that comes into play when it's time to hire for the role. So what I'm about to say is not tongue-in-cheek, because Chris, my designer programmer, and Jefferson, my video guy, are going to see this video. And hey, Chris, hey, Jeff, your jobs are safe. Though at this point, should something happen, and maybe it's a demand in terms of their lifestyle or whatever it is, and someone needs to be replaced, I'm in a much better position to hire someone else for that role, because I know how to communicate what I need. I'm able to point to work that was done in the past to explain the needs of what I have. And while some of the visual aspects, while some of the communication may be different, you as my viewer would likely not see much of a lapse of communication, a lapse of style, a lapse of delivery. The nuances are ones that maybe only I would notice. But I'm a little bit more sophisticated because I've gone through these 3 tiers. So the flaw in all of this is to do it out of order. Because many people would think I need someone full-time, and the metaphor would be like signing a lease on a 3,000 square foot space for $4,000 or $5,000 a month when you barely even have your first client. So these are the 3 tiers of successful hiring. And think of it in terms of our hypnotic language principles of compliance precedes suggestibility, compounding levels of change. Only after I've successfully mastered the first tier of hiring for the task, that is only ever the moment where I want you to then move on to the second tier, jump past the second hurdle of hiring for the hour. And only after you've gone through those wind sprints of working by the task and working by the hour should you ever consider hiring for the role. And I've given you specific examples of times that I've done that here. Down the line, I'm probably going to hire another full-time virtual assistant. I had that for a while. There's a whole other video just on that concept in this module. Though right now, I don't specifically have that need. However, as you've seen, I still have all the training materials of how I trained my previous virtual assistant. I still know what those needs are. Now, I've splintered off those specific needs because many of them were based on web work and many of them were based on video editing. And the specific need of content management, that I don't think I need someone handling any of my phone tasks, though I could probably fold in some of the day-to-day Virginia Hypnosis tasks for that individual. And if you are getting overwhelmed hearing me talk about these things about the role, you should be, because chances are you're only at the levels of Tier 1 and Tier 2. So before I wrap up this module, take a glance here once again and consider, where are you in terms of your business? For most of you, the most logical step is to begin by hiring for the task. Consider that little filter of what is something that you're doing that you don't need to be the one that's doing, and outsource it to somebody else. Once they're successful with you, hire them based on the hour. Now, hiring for the role, just as a final note, you could look at hiring that freelancer, that individual you've already worked with, on a full-time basis. But then again, it might be a reason to look elsewhere. And in terms of the resources and the services that I've referenced inside of this module, now you know where to look. So this has been the 3 tiers of successful hiring. Now, there's a lot of content in this outsourcing mastery module, because I'm telling you, this is one of those make or break modules, because many people would say, I can't afford to do this. And comfortably, I'd tell you, you can't afford not to. However, we all start somewhere. And I'm not going to tell you to hire a full-time web designer programmer for $800 a month, as I've done. I'm not going to tell you to hire a full-time video person for $650 a month, or a full-time content manager. That's probably going to actually be like $350 tops a month. Don't do that yet. You're not there. Instead, start with the individual task, pay a reasonable rate, and then pivot and work with them on an on-needed, as-needed basis. This has been the 3 tiers of successful hiring.
Thanks for listening to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast at WorkSmartHypnosis.com.
All right, Jason Linett here, and thank you once again for listening to this program. And to get even more actionable strategies for your business, head over to hypnoticbusinesssystems.com. I am the hypnosis business guinea pig. I refuse to teach you things that I have not yet done myself. So I'm only ever teaching you actionable strategies that I've tested, that I've vetted for myself, and I can show you the evidence behind it as well. So to get more just like this, get on the waiting list over at hypnoticbusinesssystems.com. To learn more, head over there today. See you soon. Hey, it's Jason Linett here, and I want you to be the first to know as we put up and share new videos and new hypnosis resources in the future. So do this right now. Click the button on this page that says subscribe, and you will be the first to find out as we upload new videos. See you soon.